AITAH for wanting to expose my sister to her husband after she confessed to my husband on her wedding day? Sorry about the title being weird. I couldn't think of a better way to say it. I'm a 24-year-old woman married to my 27-year-old husband for around 2 years now. My sister, who's 26, and her husband, also 26, have been together since high school. Me and my sister have always been tight. Even though she's only a bit older, she's been like a second mum to me. Let's just call her Jane. My husband, whom I'll call Bob, and I crossed paths during university. I was 20 at the time and he was 23. Bob was one of those guys who excelled in everything academics, sports, and he was easy on the eyes too. He was pretty popular around campus for all those reasons, and I couldn't help but have a crush on him. Jane also went to the same university. Being new, she welcomed me into her big group of friends, which included Bob. I never acted on my feelings because I respected Jane and her friendship circle. I didn't want to stir up any trouble or make things awkward. Jane was incredibly important to me. Eventually, Bob and I got to be really good friends. My feelings for him grew stronger over time. I couldn't help but notice that Jane didn't interact much with him, which seemed strange since she was close to almost everyone else in our circle. But I kept quiet about it. I did tell her that I liked him though. She warned me not to get my hopes up, saying he wasn't looking for a relationship. It was tough to hear, but I tried to accept it and see him just as a friend. Then, on my 21st birthday, he confessed his feelings for me and we started dating. And well, you know the rest, it led to marriage, and here we are today. Throughout our dating period, Jane started to pull away from me. We had a chat about it when Bob and I first got together. I even offered to break things off if she wasn't comfortable since Bob was her friend, but she brushed off the idea. She hugged me and insisted she was happy for me, so I trusted her words. Yet, despite that, she kept her distance. Her husband, let's call him Jim, didn't go to university. Instead, he worked at his dad's construction business. Jim was a good guy, always there for Jane. But according to our customs, women couldn't move out of their family homes until they got married. So Jane and I still lived with our parents back then. When Jim managed to save up enough money to buy a house, he popped the question to Jane, and she said yes. Fast forward a year, Bob popped the question, and of course I said yes. Throughout all this time, Jane had been keeping her distance from me. But when I gathered my family to share the news, she burst into tears. I thought they were tears of joy until my mum pointed out that I should have thought about my sister's feelings before breaking the news. It felt strange. Nobody seemed thrilled. Mom took Jane aside to talk privately, but Dad stayed with me. That's when he mentioned that Jane was going through a rough patch with Jim. I took their words to heart. After that, Jane kept pulling away from me even more. Whenever I tried to talk to her, she'd respond shortly. When I mentioned it to my mum, she explained that Jane was going through a tough time and advised me not to aggravate the situation. So I decided to give her space and leave her be. That all changed when Bob confessed something that shocked me. He revealed that Jane had been texting him constantly for the past few weeks. He even showed me the messages. She'd ask if they could talk or meet up. Sometimes she'd send texts late at night. The last straw was when she sent him photos of herself in revealing outfits and asked him to pick the prettiest one. That's when Bob decided to come clean to me about it. And just to clear the air, no, Bob didn't encourage her. His replies were short, and honestly, if I wasn't so mad at my sister, I'd say they were a bit rude. He felt really uncomfortable, but he put up with it because she's family. Bob also admitted that Jane had confessed her feelings to him years ago, but he turned her down. When Bob told me what was going on, it felt like everything clicked into place. I was so hurt by Jane's actions that as soon as I got home, I confronted her. I thought she'd feel ashamed, but instead, she accused me of stealing him from her. To make things worse, my mum took her side. I'd always suspected Jane was Mum's favorite, but she was my favorite too. It made sense that everyone loved Jane. I loved her too, but she betrayed me in the worst way possible. She even said she hated me and didn't want anything to do with me anymore. Nobody took my side, so I packed up my things and left. My dad insisted that it wasn't right for an unmarried girl to leave her parents' house. And to top it off, my mum called me a terrible name for going to stay with Bob. That really hurt. It took me a while to come to terms with what they said and did. Even now, it still stings when I think about it. Bob and I decided to live together before getting married. I also decided to cut ties with my family, and when Bob and I tied the knot, we only invited a few close relatives from my side. Despite the family drama, our wedding was absolutely beautiful. Just last week, my cousin mentioned that Jane had her wedding. I suppose she went through with it after all. But today, Bob showed me a message he received on Instagram from her. He hadn't noticed it because it was in the request section, but it was from a week ago. In the message, she confessed her feelings for him once more and claimed she could make him happier than me if he gave her the chance. I'm beyond upset. Bob showed me the screenshot and then blocked her. He wanted to send it to Jim, but I couldn't bring myself to agree. I know Jim deserves to know, but I just can't handle dealing with Jane anymore. It's too much. I feel awful for keeping this from Jim, but I also don't want to risk everything blowing up, especially when Bob and I have finally found some peace in our lives. I want to express my gratitude for all the helpful advice I've received on both this post and my other one. I realize now that deep down, I've still been holding on to the family that raised me, especially my sister. Your comments have really given me a wake-up call. For those wondering why I'm worried about this blowing up, I know my sister well. I'm afraid she might show up at my house with my mom and things could escalate to the point where we'd need the police. But I also recognize that if we stay silent, she'll continue to bother my husband and make Jim's life even harder. Following your suggestions, I told Bob he could reach out to Jim if he wanted to. He said he'd think about it, so I'm leaving it at that for now. Knowing him though, he's probably already sent it to Jim despite my saying no, but I'll wait and see what happens. Thanks again. I'll keep you updated if anything unfolds. Update. Well, it turns out Bob did send the message to Jim, despite my request for him not to. And here's the kicker, he also screen recorded the message to prove that it was from her account. I had no idea he did that. Looks like one of us has some brains, huh? But getting back to the story, I won't delve too deeply into the details, but Jim didn't reply until last night. He ended up giving Bob a call and they had quite a lengthy conversation. From what Bob told me, when Jim confronted Jane about the messages, she tried to shift the blame onto Bob, claiming that he was the one making advances towards her. Needless to say, things got pretty heated, and Jane ended up storming off to stay with our parents. I took your advice to heart, and I decided to send the screenshot to my parents. But I couldn't bring myself to send it to my mom. I'm sorry, but the thought of talking to her still fills me with dread, and I don't think I'll be ready for it anytime soon. Instead, I sent it to my dad. Surprisingly, he assured me that he and my mom would handle the situation, and he advised me not to tell anyone about what Jane did. I can't help but feel a pang of guilt for assuming he wouldn't take my side. Guess I underestimated him, haha. Oh, and for those of you who might be wondering whether Bob forwarded Jim those old messages from Jane years ago, he actually didn't. Funny enough, he got a new phone right after we decided to cut contact with my family, so he doesn't have access to those messages anymore. It's like a stroke of luck in an otherwise messy situation. As for Jim, I'm not sure if he's going to file for divorce or give Jane another chance. However, he did tell Bob not to contact him anymore, so I feel like we've done what we can for now. Thankfully, Jane hasn't shown up at my house yet, but I've taken your advice about installing security cameras. We're planning to get that sorted out next week. I just want to take a moment to sincerely thank each and every one of you for the unwavering support and invaluable guidance you've provided throughout this whole ordeal. You were all spot on. Bob has truly become my rock, my new family. From now on, I'm making a conscious effort not to let thoughts of Jane or my parents consume me anymore. Oh, and speaking of family, tonight we're actually heading over to Bob's parents' place for dinner. I'm rushing to jot this down before we leave. Once again, I can't thank you all enough for everything. I genuinely hope each and every one of you has a fantastic day ahead.